With the power to bring people together or just help us escape the world, gaming is more than just a game. So join me, Ziggy Chris, as I speak to developers, content creators, and gamers like you and me to discover how each of us was saved by gaming. Welcome in everyone, I, as always, am Ziggy Chris, and with me today, quite fittingly, because we are the Saved by Gaming podcast, and I am talking to someone who actually helps use games to save people, so this is perfect, because today we're speaking to a comedian, doctor, chairman of Game Therapy UK. I'm sure there's many other things that I don't know that we could add to that list of things they can tell us, but welcome in Gary Colman. How are you today?
I'm really well, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having us on your podcast. This is an absolute treat. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. As I was saying, I've spoken to some people who know you by means of just the world that we live in.
They're lying, by the way. It's all not true.
Yeah, we're referring to Imran Youssef, who we had on the pod. I believe you're friends. So
I'm a really good friend. Yeah,
it's a small world, isn't it? It all comes together.
It is. It's kind of it is kind of niche, isn't it? A bit geeky, I suppose. Gaming.
Yeah, but I have one important question, I think, before we kind of dive into anything else, because as I mentioned, this is the Saved by Gaming podcast, and basically every episode I come in here and I wax lyrical with people about the healing power of games and the positive power of games and all that kind of thing. So I guess you're the best person to ask, am I preaching nonsense? Should I change the name of the pod? Have we gone wrong, or am I onto something here?
Yeah, toxic gaming, that's actually the new name of the podcast. No, not at all. I mean, I think so. I think one of the reasons why we're chatting is because I'm involved with a charity called Game Therapy UK, and obviously we're using games therapeutically. Yeah, I mean, I think all gamers just understand, don't they, that games seem to be inherently therapeutic. They're fun, and that's why we play them. We're playing them mainly because they're fun and enjoyable. But there's some kind of well-beingness about them, I think. So yeah, no, you're totally on the right track.
Perfect. Okay, you heard it here, guys. I don't need to change the name of the pod. We're okay for a while. So,
ruined by gaming. There you go. That's the next.
Ruined by gaming. That's a very different tangent. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. And so, as I mentioned, you are still practicing as a doctor. Is that correct? You do at least one.
I do like a day a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just keep my hand in. Yeah.
And a comedian, and you've gone into games therapy. How did that come about? Can you tell me what inspired you to explore games as a therapeutic tool? Like, how did that come into play?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always played games. I've always been a gamer, and I started. So I'm sort of getting on a bit now, but I probably started in the 1970s, back then, and so I was kind of starting to game at pretty much kind of the birth of video gaming, I suppose. I mean, I remember video games were just really kind of coming out, and you could just about afford. Like, what did I get? A Dragon 32 PC. My mum and dad for Christmas got me a Dragon 32. It was a Welsh-made computer, which obviously went bust. And they were really, really sort of simple, crude games, but they seemed magical at the time. So I was there at the kind of the beginning of the gaming things as a punter, so as a consumer of it, and I loved games, as kids did. But I kind of veered off. I very quickly veered off into another set of games, which are tabletop role-playing games, which are sort of Dungeons and Dragons type games. And I think, I'm not sure if I would do it now, but at the time, I found the games at the time, computer games, so limiting because they were so basic that I found tabletop role-playing games and gaming with people much more interesting. So I've always kind of a lifelong passion and love of gaming, mainly tabletop role-playing games, things like Dungeons and Dragons. And then, as I mentioned, I've done a couple of things. I was lucky enough to qualify as a doctor, so I was working as a doctor. I was originally a doctor in the army, and then I left the army, and I worked with people experiencing homelessness. I still do. I do 1 day a week, doing sort of end-of-life care for people experiencing homelessness. But I kept on playing games socially. And it was during COVID that I was just curious. I thought, I was aware in America mainly there was this thing called Dungeons and Dragon therapy, or they were calling it geek therapy, where they were using Dungeons and Dragons or the tabletop role-playing games therapeutically to effect change, often with people who had trauma. And my patients who were experiencing homelessness often had a life of trauma. And so a couple of years ago, I was just curious as to whether or not if we played Dungeons and Dragons basically with people experiencing homelessness, whether it would be helpful. And so that's kind of where the interest started, I suppose. It very quickly became obvious it was very helpful. And if nothing else, it just brings people together. It's a social game. It's fun, isn't it? The games are fun, and so that in itself is helpful. And then as we got more into it, and we got other people involved, psychologists, clinical psychologists, social workers, academics, professors, we began to sort of tease apart what exactly does make it so therapeutic, and it became, the charity became much bigger.
So, because I think myself, my community, and other people out there have often thought and said that it has a kind of therapeutic aspect to it, but even before you started this concept, was there much scientific evidence out there? You said it was being used in the States a bit.
Yeah.
Did you find much before you kind of started analysing it yourself?
Yeah, so and before we did that, I was just curious. I was in quite a few groups on social media, Dungeons and Dragons type groups on social media, and I was aware that in America that they were doing this therapeutic gaming. And to be honest, what I was reading from the States, I was a bit suspicious, because I kind of work with NHS. I've got that kind of NHS mentality, and in healthcare, social care in America is different. It's just a different approach. And I was reading this going, the cynic in me was going, I don't think this is research. I don't think this is evidence. I think this is marketing, because they're all working privately in the marketplace. And what I was reading was that tiny little number, that very small numbers. It didn't look like the kind of research you'd see with a drugs trial or a trial in the NHS. To me, it looked like marketing. And so I was slightly cynical, going, I'm not so sure. And then we started doing it, and we started speaking to other people in the UK who were working maybe within the NHS and had smaller projects going. And they were saying, anecdotally, this is not strong evidence, but anecdotally, it seemed to be profoundly effective. And that was the spur to us to give it a go. And then it was also, that's why we kind of formed the charity. We were bringing together lots of little disparate groups of gamers, clinicians, people who were working with it in the UK, and we just brought people together. We had this charity. We formed a charity to support the development of delivering the projects, but also we have 3 aims to the charity. One aim is to deliver these projects. The other aim is to develop rigorous academic research in the area outside of the marketplace. And then the third aim is to once we have this evidence base, is to deliver evidence-based teaching in the best practice for therapeutic gaming. So we had a slightly different approach, I think, because of the way our health service and our social services are set up in the UK.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that people are exploring it, because, and like you say, anecdotally you hear tales. I mean, I try and get my children to play, because it's got for them in terms of just learning maths and like adding the dice up and all that. There's other elements to it outside of the mental health aspect, isn't there? There's all these other learnings that people can use in schools and stuff, because I've seen the school groups now doing it and things like that as well. It's kind of expanding because it's got so many levels to it.
Yeah. So our charity is basically therapeutic gaming. We're not delivering therapy. We're not delivering mental health. It's often therapists who are doing it or clinicians who are doing it. But what we're doing is therapeutic. It's more about well-being and wellness than delivering specific therapy.
Yeah, because I think the biggest thing and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, and I've played a fair amount of D&D over the years. I'm a big tabletop gamer as much as I am a computer gamer, and so that sense of community, the getting together at the table, I always think whether it's online or at the table, that sense of coming together. Sometimes don't even play for half an hour or so, because you've got that moment of just connecting as a group and sharing stories and having your snacks or whatever it is, and then it brings people, in my experience, I've seen people who, it brings them out of themselves a little bit, give them something to look forward to every week. Is that what you're talking about in terms of this connectivity? Yeah.
So with the charity, Game Therapy UK, we are game agnostic. So we're not interested in a specific game. It's not Dungeons and Dragons, it's games. So we're interested in video games, board games, and tabletop role-playing games. They're all equally beneficial, and they all have advantages and disadvantages. I think we're only in our sort of second or third year now, so we have probably kind of started more with tabletop role-playing games and other games, and there are reasons for that. I think with tabletop role-playing games, there are some clear sort of social advantages in that you tend to play them cooperatively. Not all video games or board games are cooperative. Most board games are competitive. You're competing against one another. And a lot of video games, you're competing against the machine or another person. Whereas I think all tabletop role-playing games pretty much are cooperative. And we've found that being a cooperative game is therapeutic, is helpful. And also they're social. You sit around a table with other people, either in the real world or online, and play with real people. That's the advantage of it, I suppose.
Yeah, I love cooperative games. I have mainly cooperative games because I love, like you say, that aspect of it cancels out the rivalry, it stops the competition, and it gets everyone working together as a team, whatever the generations that sit at my table. So even just classics like Pandemic, I just love because it gets people
love it.
working together, thinking together as a group, and supporting each other.
Yeah. There's a Call of Cthulhu version of Pandemic. And
I have it,
yeah, I love that game. I prefer that to Pandemic. It's just, I think there's that extra level of imagination and just fantasy to it. I quite enjoy. Also, I suppose I'm a doctor, so the idea of a pandemic seems less fun to me. It seems a bit more, so that sounds like my job rather than sending evil back to from whence it came. That sounds more fun to me.
Yeah, I think they did make a lot of money during the actual pandemic as well.
COVID would help with sales,
Yeah, for sure.
That's Cthulhu. Cthulhu was doing that. That's
the Cthulhu one is
the
great.
Marketing. Cthulhu is behind the marketing of Pandemic, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do love the Cthulhu version. It is very good. And so you mentioned, because a lot of your games are, did you say, hosted by clinicians or therapists? Or?
So, well, just coincidentally, because the way we work is, and again, I think it's slightly different to our friends and colleagues in America. In that, in America again, and I'm really not being disparaging of the American model. It's really good. And we know the guys over there and the girls over there, and what they're doing is really, really good. And they would say themselves, they just happen to work more in the marketplace, and so that's kind of affected the way they've evolved. We've come from a sort of more of an NHS model where we aren't used to working in the marketplace. So for example, in the American model, often it is a therapist, a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever, or who would be the GM, the games master, and then the players would be their clients, either one-on-one or in a small group, and that's how they kind of model it. So the GM is the therapist. Our model is a bit different. Our model, we think our model, it works for us, and we think it's a bit more kind of egalitarian, it's a bit more democratizing. So we just think games are inherently therapeutic. You don't need to play with a psychiatrist for it to be therapeutic. You just need to play the game. So our games masters, are not necessarily therapists. They're just very good games masters or games mistresses who play the games. And they just need to play the game thoughtfully, and we can give some sort of training and thought on that. So they do that. We then, if it's a vulnerable group, because a lot of our games are played with very vulnerable groups, we also usually have a second chair, somebody else who's sitting in that room. And that second chair, they may be playing the game, they may be observing a game, they're more likely to be the therapist, because they're probably holding the space. And we just play a game, like a normal game of whatever your favourite tabletop role-playing game is, or board game. We're just playing the game thoughtfully, purposefully. But then if we're with a vulnerable group and there is an issue, there is a problem, the game just pauses. Whoever's holding that space, the second chair, would sort of step in, address the issue. It might be some sort of expressed behaviour or some anger or some upset. They address that, and then once that's been addressed, they just hand it back to the
game master,
game GM, yep, and the game just continues. So it's a slightly different model. And if it's not a vulnerable group, if it's a kind of a normative group, then there may not be a second chair. It may just be a GM. So I think our model is you don't need to be a therapist. We're not doing therapy. It's a therapeutic process, and anyone can do it. You just need a bit of training, a little bit of thought, and most people just do it instinctively anyway. We do a lot. We very lucky in that we're able to get invited to conferences and Comic Cons and what have you, and games expos, and we're there with our stall and we're chatting to people as they come by, and a lot of people come across and go, "Oh, we're really interested in what you're trying to do." And they'll say, "I'm a GM. I'm really, really interested in playing safely or therapeutically, or in a kind of a well-being space," and they'll talk about it. And I mean, almost always you can just say to them, "I'm sure you are playing therapeutically because you're interested and you're curious. The fact you're asking us how to do it means you're thinking about it." I think there's a very small number of people who are probably playing quite thoughtlessly. Certainly, when I do go on social media, one of the common threads I will see is people who are describing an incredibly toxic game that they seem to be stuck in, and it's often the person running the game who's being incredibly toxic, or maybe one of the players. But I think that's quite rare. I mean, in the real world, I've never experienced it firsthand. I've only ever seen it, read about it in social media, but it clearly is a problem that's being discussed. But I think most people just play. Most people are nice. Most people are nice, decent people, and they just want to play games, thoughtfully and kindly, with compassion.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of people in the gaming community, or at least definitely the tabletop, like you say, in terms of if you're gathering around people to play at a table, generally I feel like the vibe is usually quite a solid and safe one anyway.
Yeah.
The people that are coming to those games. But I wonder, is it more beneficial than other types of therapy or support in terms of bringing some of the people together that you're dealing with?
No, I can yes and no. I don't think there's nothing specifically therapeutic about playing games above other creative endeavors. So, for example, one of the projects we have is with people experiencing homelessness. I mentioned that, and within services supporting people experiencing homelessness, particularly people who have got long-term homelessness, who seem to be quite sort of entrenched in homelessness, there almost always is a history of complex trauma, of a long history of trauma in that person's lives, and then it's made worse, of course, by experiencing homelessness, which itself is traumatic, and they're often stuck in this world of trauma. And there's lots of services trying to help, and there's lots of creative therapies trying to help. So it could be, you'll see art therapists go in, and drama therapists and music therapists. There's lots of music and drawing, and all of these things are creative endeavors, and they're all therapeutic. They all work. And playing games is the same but different. It's the same. The difference is it's what you want to do. I think that's all it is. So if for me, I probably wouldn't want to do rap therapy. It's not my thing. I may not want to do sport. Whereas if I was sitting there and somebody says, "Hey, do you want to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons?" Well, they've just hit the right button, because I go, "Yeah, of course I do," and that's all it is. It's just another option for people. So not everybody wants to do boxing therapy, or boxing or whatever. Whereas if you offer them a game of Cthulhu, talking about Cthulhu or whatever, then for those people who are interested in that, that's the way in. And then it's the same thing. It's just sitting around, socializing, talking to people being compassionate, interested.
So finding the right connective pastime or distraction, whatever it is, for the relevant person.
And the similarity with all of these things is they are self-motivating for the right person, and that's kind of what you want. Nobody wants to sit in therapy, I don't think. Nobody wants to. I would like to sit here and have you make me dredge up horrible things from my past or be criticised. Nobody's interested in that, especially if you're in a world where a lot of people are asking you to do that. If somebody sits down and says, "Would you just like to do something fun?" then of course you're going to say yeah. And if that's singing or dancing or acting, then that's great. If it's playing a role-playing game or a video game, then that's the thing that's going to hook you into it. And it's a self-motivation to come back time and time again. And then after weeks or months or years of people being together, it starts becoming a sort of deeply therapeutic process.
Yeah. And if you get them hooked on Cthulhu Pandemic, you can upgrade them to Call of Cthulhu and just keep going from there.
Absolutely, yeah. And end it with devil worshipping. No, you don't have it. No, don't do that.
Yeah, that's no.
It's a different charity.
Yep. And so, obviously, there's certain things that are safeguarded, but can you perhaps present any examples of where you've seen the benefits of these games for someone, whether it's a group or an individual, just so to give us some context to people of how it helps?
Yeah, I mean, so many examples. Most of us as well. If the audience are listening, if we're all gamers, we probably just reflect. We could all just reflect on how it affects us. So I find gaming therapeutic, deeply therapeutic. I was in a game last night as part of the charity, and we have a group for military veterans. I'm a military veteran myself, and I was GMing this game, and so I suppose I'm there kind of running the game, and you could think, oh well, I'm there to help the well-being of the people playing. But that's not true at all. I'm getting as much out of it as anybody else from that table. It's a high point in my week. I really look forward to seeing the folk in the game. We've been playing the game for maybe 2 or 3 years now, so it's a really important part of my week of just sitting there. As you mentioned, often the first half hour is just chatting. In fact, we kind of schedule that in. So I'm online for half an hour before the game starts. The game starts, exactly at 7:30. The first dice is rolled and we start playing. But I'm there from 7 o'clock, and people drop in, we have a chat. There's definitely chats around well-being issues. There's definitely chats around mental health, as people do when people meet together. It's a space where we can talk about those things. So personally, I've experienced that myself, the benefits, and then you see it in all of the groups. Recently, I visited some schools, and there was one school where there was a librarian, Mike Jarrison, one of our volunteers, and he's running some amazing projects. And one of the projects he was demonstrating was, these are all, it's an after school club in his school library, and he's got loads of kids, young people playing all kinds of games. Warhammer, there's a game with model tanks, which I'd never seen before, where the tanks kind of blow each other up. There's a girls group playing D&D. There's all these different things. And there's also another project which he's running, which wasn't part of the charity, where he just sits and he reads. Do you remember those old Ian Livingstone sort of fighting fantasy kind of choose your own adventure books?
Oh, the choose your own adventures. I had a bunch of those. They're great.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. So he sits there and he has two copies of the same book, and a pupil will have one copy, he will have another copy, and they sit on the same page and they read through it together. And it's just a simple idea. You do the young person's playing a choose your own adventure book with an adult who's a librarian who takes them through it. And obviously the numeracy and the reading skills are improved by doing this. But I think this is a young person who was maybe been taken out of class for behavioural issues, and just I suppose the privilege for a young person to have that one-on-one time from somebody was just amazing to see. Later on in the day, you might see some sort of behaviour from this young person. They may have gotten themselves a bit overwhelmed in the library when the games were playing, and the trust relationship between this educator and this young person was just amazing to see. And it was kind of forged through reading these sort of Ian Livingstone type books, these choose your own adventure books. I think it's a project that is a charity where we're interested. We might look at supporting and funding if we can. But it's just a really innovative way of connecting with young people, and it is a game, isn't it? I think you describe the book as a game.
I would say so, yeah, because and
you roll dice and things, don't you?
You're making choices that affect the story. It's kind of like an RPG in a book.
It is like it is exactly, yeah. Again, going back to when I sort of first saw these books, again, I was playing video games. And at the time, video games were pretty much choose your own adventure games. I don't know how long you've been playing video games for, but the first kind of adventure games were basically that. You'd walk into a room and the computer would say to you, what do you want to do? And you'd be screaming at the computer trying to get it to do things. And of course the computer would just come out and go, yeah, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. They were basically, you had to guess what the computer wanted you to do, and then you would type in manually into your screen.
Yeah. I'm fortunate. I'm older than I look. I'm 45. So I'm
very young. You're pretty good for 45.
Thanks. So I love it when people say that. So I grew up. I mean, my first gaming machine I remember playing on, I think we had a ZX Spectrum in our house, and that was like the first thing that I remember playing on. So but I think that's a great thing about my generation, your generation, and that kind of era in general, is we've grown up with the development of these games. Like they've evolved as we have matured as well, and they've kind of grown with us. And so I think it's amazing the amount of gamers now that are in their like 40s to 50s, because we grew up in that era where they were just coming into like relevance, and they've evolved so quickly. And when I was talking to Imran recently, we were talking about the fact that in a few years' time, old people's homes will be full of consoles, because it's moved on from knitting and everything. We're all playing games, and we will want to do that when we're sat. We'll be playing games together in our old people's home. So
two things. One was, so I've got young kids. They're teenagers now, teenage boys, and we're in the school holidays. They will really bad parenting, but they're almost certainly sat in the house playing video games now, and they've got these amazing games that they can, the amazing games that you can play now, whatever it is. There's still a demand for these old-fashioned retro games. They still get these old games, and they play games that I recognise from when I was a kid, and they still find those games fun. So that's one thing. But the old people in the dementia, we're looking at doing a dementia project probably next year. We've been chatting to a couple of NHS units about looking at doing dementia games, and sort of the challenges of developing tabletop role-playing games, or maybe board games even, for dementia. But you're absolutely right. When I walk around conventions, I mean, one of my favourite conventions is certainly a thing called Dragon Meet in London, and the people wandering around there are all my age. They're all sort of got silver beards and no hair and what have you, paunches. We're as a generation, we're not far away from being in care homes, sadly. But I'm almost looking forward to it. It'll be brilliant. Just get plugged into a computer and got all the time in the world to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Imran said we'll be beating all of the young nurses on the games because we'll be experts, which will be fantastic. And so Game Therapy UK has expanded, but I wondered in your analysis, I guess, and the way that things have expanded, Have you encountered or dealt with healthcare professionals who are initially sceptical about the process or this idea in general?
Oh yeah, I'm very much so, yeah. In the same way, for players, it's a bit Marmite. Either you speak to somebody who's a potential client or a player, they'll either go, yeah, this is for me, and they love it, or they'll just stare at you blankly and go, you want me to play what? And they're just not interested. You get the same from everybody. So if we're speaking to maybe funders, we're trying to try and get some funding for something, they'll just sort of blank you out and stare at you and go, I've literally no idea what you're talking about. And that can be a hurdle. But we're lucky enough to be in a position where people tend to come to us. We're pushing against an open door because people have heard of us and they come to us and they already are interested in this, I suppose, an innovative approach. There's something in it that's interested them. There are plenty of people out there who themselves are gamers or were gamers. Yeah, certainly, and there can be resistance, but I think we just see it less. Maybe because we've become a bit more established and we've got more evidence and data, and people are interested in that. They're interested in the positive results. Even if they're not into games, they're interested in the results that we're giving and the effectiveness. Or maybe it's a bit more zeitgeisty as well. I'm sure if I'd sort of mentioned to anybody 10 years ago Dungeons and Dragons, most people would have just stared at me and gone, I have no idea what you're talking about. Whereas something like Dungeons and Dragons, there's been movies, there's TV shows, it's in the media a lot more. And I think there's just an awareness of games.
Yes.
And it wasn't that long ago when I was kind of into comic books, and so it wasn't that, well, I suppose it was decades ago, but if you mentioned comic book heroes and things, no one had a clue what you're talking about, whereas now it's just, everyone knows who Spider-Man's girlfriend's called. Everyone knows it's not a geeky thing, it's just, and everyone's seen the movies, so I think geek culture has definitely become more mainstream. And that might help, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think back to when the Mallrats movie comes to mind, with the fact that the geeky guys in it are the comic book fans and they can't get girlfriends and stuff like that, whereas now it's like mainstream, it's everywhere. And the similar thing with, like you mentioned, tabletop now is everywhere. The growth of things like Critical Role and all these other things that have pushed it more into the mainstream than ever before. So I guess I can see where you're coming from in terms of it being a little bit easier than if you'd done it a decade ago.
Yeah. I think the timing's being helpful, I think, for that. Yeah.
And so you started presumably based around. Did you start in London and then you've branched out from there?
Yes, we started in London just because I live in London, and we started the first projects were for people experiencing homelessness and for military veterans. I think mainly just because I'd worked in one area and I was currently working in the other. And initially it was just me being curious and sort of reaching out to various people. Interestingly, so we did start off in London. Interestingly, it was a very small part of London. It was in Camden we started out because I was looking for somebody else who might be interested in helping me get the charity going. And I spoke to a guy, and then somebody said, do you know what? I think there is somebody who works in homelessness who plays Dungeons and Dragons. I went, who's that? And they mentioned this guy's name, and I worked with him. And he was, I sort of sat next to him. I know, and we just never mentioned. We know each other for years. We never mentioned that we played D&D because it was a bit sort of geekish, isn't it? It's a bit nerdy. And so he was the founder of the charity, and neither of us knew that we played D&D. And so that's where it started. And it started in London because we both were living in London. But I think we're both very keen for it not to be London centric, and it is Game Therapy UK, and so. We have projects all across the UK. Our trustees are from across the UK, and we are in the process now because I guess the charity is really about governance. We're there just to support projects, either with financial support if we can, or through giving them equipment, or more importantly, just governance. We just make sure that the projects are well organised and they're safe and they're evidence based. And what we're doing at the moment is in terms of governance. Governance is quite a boring word, but it's about frameworking it. What we're doing at the moment is getting regional committees. So, for example, in September, we're starting to look at getting Game Therapy UK (Scotland) going in September, and also looking at Game Therapy UK North going. So we'll be in the North East, the North West, and Yorkshire. We've already got projects in those areas, so we're putting in committees to sort of help with the governance and frameworking of it. And then the plan would be to go through the whole of the UK and to get all of the regions, covered with their own committees, their own local committees, so that volunteers, be governed locally. That's the plan.
I was chuckling at all the use of the word governance only because as well I'm a governor of a school, so as I hear that word a lot.
Yeah. I know, yawn, governance, but it's important. It is important. I mean, that's what we're there for. We're there to do the boring bits, to make it safe, so that people can do the fun bits, which is to go in and game. We just want people to be able to do the nice fun bits and game, and not have to worry too much about the dull bits, which is safeguarding and all those other stuff, which is so important to do it properly, and fundraising, getting money, that sort of thing, putting in bids for money. Someone has to do it.
Yeah, we do. And so a few.
It is also, of course, very rewarding. If anybody wants to be a trustee of our charity, if anybody out there interested in being a trustee, do drop me a line. We obviously want trustees from all around the UK, and it's brilliant. It's so much fun. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was going to get onto how people can get involved, but you pitch it. That's fine. You go for it. And so, obviously, you said as an organisation, obviously, you're interested in all types of games. But looking back to yourself for a moment, would you say D&D is your favourite? You've mentioned quite a lot, or is that the game for you personally?
Definitely, yes. It's kind of part of me. It's like music, isn't it? You want to kind of have a really cool band that you're talking about, and in reality, most of us just listen to the same bands all the time. I started out by playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it was like my first big passion. It was the only kind of game that I was aware of for a while. Oh gosh, that's not true at all. When I started playing, I played Dungeons and Dragons. There's other games. I played Traveller, and there's another game, Call of Cthulhu, which I played. RuneQuest. All these other games I used to play back in the day. But it was mainly Dungeons and Dragons because it was just the biggest game. It still is the biggest game. I spend a lot of time playing games now through the charity, and whenever we're setting up projects, they're all co-created with the client. So we say to the clients, "Hey guys, what would you like to play? What game would you like to play?" And they tend to come back and go, "Oh, can we play Dungeons and Dragons?" Just because of they've heard of it, the marketing has worked. And I suppose as people who are delivering the games, we do get a bit kind of think, oh well, there are other games you could try. You could try this game, only because we play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We like to play other games, but it's a good game. I was playing it last night. I enjoyed playing it. It's probably my go-to game.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It's a classic game. But there are other games out there, and I think sometimes they're kind of fun to play just because you don't get a chance to play them so much. It's not Dungeons and Dragons, so big shout out to the other games as well, Cthulhu and what have you.
Yeah. There's a whole range. I mean, I played the Alien one. That was fantastic. That was it was challenging but good. I've recently just run my first game of Daggerheart, which was interesting to try.
I haven't played it. I bought it. I bought it and gave it to my kid. I haven't played it yet, but I've been reading about it, and reading it looks interesting. So we're talking about sort of the therapeutic element. So one of the interesting things about the tabletop role-playing games is it is turn-based, and that can be really helpful. It can be really helpful for people to understand that there is an opportunity for them to speak. So you're absolutely right, that can be helpful. And also I think there's a huge, did we mention this? But there seems to be a huge overrepresentation of different communities within the game. So there's a huge overrepresentation, sort of numerically, of people of neurodivergent, of autistic adults and kids playing role-playing games. And it might be things like the turn-based nature of it might help if you have difficulty with social skills or social communicating. So that might be helpful, because some people will just dominate and just talk over everybody else. But
you're just kind of ensuring as the GM that you are caring for your table, making sure that everyone is getting a moment. And if you're aware that someone hasn't spoken much because there is no initiative and people are rambling, you're going to turn to them and be like, okay, well, they're doing this, so what are you doing while this is happening? And just turning the action and controlling it.
But so the initiative is really only used in combat, and most of the games that most people play probably aren't in combat. You're exploring, doing other things. So even if you don't have initiative then, so it's still a skill that you need throughout the game is to pull people into the game if they want to be in the game. I mean, they may be enjoying just sitting quietly watching the game. That might be their enjoyment of the game, in which case that's fine. Yeah. But if they want to try and get involved, then you just need to constantly have the opportunity, give them the opportunity to get back into the game.
Exactly. Yeah, just making sure they're not getting lost in the crowd.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so one of the key questions I always ask someone, ironically, you kind of fill every caveat for already, because I'll tell you what I normally ask people, and it's quite funny, because I always say to people who come on the show, if you were a doctor, but you are a doctor, what would be your prescribed game to make people feel good? But you kind of got fill all of the caveats potentially, but I'll throw it out there.
If I was a doctor,
your official hat on. And I mean, you said you use lots of games, but I mean, it's up to you if you want.
But I think so. I can't. The opposite of your question is, we get lots of people. We get people from the industry sending in games to us saying, "Oh, we've got this therapeutic game. We've written this therapeutic game. Will you have a look at it?" And I guess what they want us to do is help them market their game, which is fair enough. But we're not going to do that. But anyway, they send these games in, and I send this little reply, go back and saying, "We just think all games are inherently therapeutic." So I don't think there is a game. I think that the interesting thing is, it could be any game. It's how you play the game. So within some of our therapeutic games, we have games that, you mentioned Aliens RPG. So the military group I know play a lot of Aliens RPG, and they play a lot of games that you wouldn't inherently think of as being therapeutic. Games where there's lots of death and mauling and horror, but that can be incredibly therapeutic for the right group if it's played thoughtfully. So I don't think there is a right game. I think the right game is the game that you're interested in playing, you're passionate about, and it's the game that you want to play in that moment. So I haven't answered your question at all, have I?
No, that's okay. And I mean, as an addition to that, and again, you can say if I'm on the right tangent or we are on the same page, I would say a big part of it as well is who you play the game with, about, as much as what game you're playing.
Chris, do you know what I would say? I would say it's who you play the game with, not the game you're playing. Can we just edit that in as my answer?
Yeah, no one will ever know. No one will ever know. We jest. But I believe that it's what you make of it, right? Isn't it? Like you said, it's
the game. Yeah, the game is inherently therapeutic, and the game is not the bit of paper or the thing that you plug into your video game or download onto your computer. That's not the game. The game is people playing. That's the game. Or it's your imagination. The game takes place in your brain, doesn't it? Really. So yeah.
Yeah, we did it together. It was a team effort. It
was the journey you went on together.
Yeah. And lastly, obviously, I've already spoken to Imran Youssef, and I've spoken to a bunch of people from both in and out of the games industry. We're talking to gamers, developers, streamers, or content creators, all different people within the gaming community. But is there anyone, and it could be someone you've met on your journey or someone you don't know but you just admire from a distance, is there anyone you'd be interested in hearing their Saved by Gaming story? Anyone else you'd like to hear?
Oh gosh, if Imran hadn't been on, I would definitely say Imran, because Imran is such a wonderful, beautiful person, but he's also an incredibly charitable person, and he's done a huge amount in the sort of charitable space. He was quite key in us in our charity getting going as well. I probably doesn't mention that, but he was very key. Yeah. If it hadn't been for Imran, it would have been much harder for us to get going and certainly doing young person's projects. So Imran is an absolute star. But you've already had Imran on. Get Imran back on again, maybe.
He's welcome anytime. He knows it.
There are so many people within our charity. People keep contacting me and asking me to come on, which is lovely, because I'm the chairman of the charity. But there are so many other voices in our charity who could say far more interesting things about therapeutic gaming than I can.
Like you say, there's so many great people out there, and we've spoken to some luckily, and hope to be speaking to a few more. And for anyone who's been listening, who, as you said, you get people come up to you at conferences and things like, how can I get involved or how can I help? This is your chance to kind of, just before we go, let me know anything you want to put out there in terms of how people can get involved. Yeah,
so we're very active. If you go to our website, which I'm guessing, hopefully you'll put a link somewhere.
We'll make sure it's all linked. Anything you say, I'll find and put in.
Yeah. So it's game-therapy.co.uk, is what you say. Our stuff's on there, but if you want to get involved as a volunteer, there's a button, click a button, and that'll take you through to a little form. Fill the form in and let us know which region you live in, and we'll invite you into our regional projects. If you've got an idea for a project, a therapeutic gaming project, again, there's a button. Click on that button and you can propose a project, and we'll be in touch with you and discuss that. We have got, so we're all over the UK. In particular, kind of coming up, we're very excited about, we've got an academic conference in therapeutic gaming, which is on the 28th of November in London, in partnership with University College London Clinical Psychology Department. So that'll be very, very exciting. That'll be kind of a UK first. Yeah. But have you got the website? All of our socials are on there. You can join our newsletter, and we'll keep you posted on what we're doing. But we'd love to get volunteers involved as either trustees or one of our committees or delivering projects.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being today.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I'm sure I could pick your brain for a lot longer. I'd love to have more of these discussions, because I'm sure, like yourself, I just love talking to people about, that's why I'm doing a podcast, right? That's why I started this whole thing, is I just love talking about this topic of how games can benefit people. And a big part of that, the concurrent thing, one of the big, continuing themes throughout is about community and just people connecting. That's a big part of whether it's online or offline. That's been one of the biggest themes that I think people take from all of this.
And that's why this is really helpful. So, I really do appreciate, Chris, the chance of just coming on, because it is about community, and it's about reaching out and finding people who go, oh, I might be interested in that, and be part of that group, part of that community. Yeah. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
No worries. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget we have a Discord. You can join us on there for more, stay together, find your tribe with us. And remember, no matter what else you do, remember to hit save, everyone. And take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This show was brought to you by me, Ziggy Chris. So thanks very much for listening. You know how to do podcast things by now. So if you liked this, push the button, tell your friends, do all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Take care.